Hi everyone, hope you're all having a good day, and welcome to a new episode of Velocity Kinetics. Now, today, not going to be talking anything motorsport related or anything like that today, but rather I'm going to go through my top picks for different categories of car, and this will reluctantly include the SUV market, but what do I think is the best? The best super mini, best hatchback, best saloon, best estate, best SUV, best 4x4, best luxury, and so on. Whilst I haven't driven any of them, I obviously can't tell you what they're like to live with. This is all based on, well, ultimately, even if I had driven them, it would be based on whether I would go and buy one. So what I'm going to do is this will be based on whether I would even go and consider looking at one if I were in the market for a new car. And I'm not going to discriminate between powertrains, whether it's diesel, electric, hybrid, petrol, you name it. It's just going to be a straightforward. I would get this. This is not what I would choose. So let's get cracking, shall we? So on to my recommendations. Um, Apologies in advance for this piece of video. There are some flashing lights which I've zoomed the camera in to try and avoid that happening. You might see a little bit on the wall over there, but also George has decided to have a nap, so I can't go and turn the light on, so I've had to tell the camera to prioritise exposure over frame rate. So we'll see what happens. You're waking up now, are you, dude? No? I don't know what he wants. I don't think he knows what he wants. So, on to what the Velocity Kinetics recommendations would be for each sector of the market. So, your sectors are your super minis, your family hatchbacks, small saloon, small estate, big estate, SUV, 4x4, and people carrier if that still exists. But I'm starting off with what I know, super minis. So the super mini market is it's not saturated, not by a long shot. You've always got your classic super minis like your Fiestas, your Clios, your Corsas, your Swifts. You've got some undercover, or you could call undercover heroes like Fabias and the Seat Leon, or you've got, no, not Leon, the Cooper even, Seat Cooper. Or you've got things more premium like your Volkswagen Polo. And then you've got things, if they still exist, the Skoda, the little tiny Skodas and the tiny Seat Mii, which not recently, not my cup of tea. You've got the Smart, and ad infinitum to find the right words eventually. I'm a bit biased on this one because if I had my own money, I would probably go to a Suzuki dealer first. The Swift would be my first choice as Velocity Kinetics. I've had one. Granted, it was a non-turbocharged one of the last ones. It was a 65 plate, so it was just before the booster jet engine was introduced. My sister's got one of the ones with a booster jet engine. It sounds a bit ropey now, but that's, I believe they don't believe in spending a lot of money on maintenance. But my immediate first choice would probably be a Swift. However, there is a caveat to that choice. So my caveat to that is, if I was doing primarily town driving with very little need to go on any sort of dual carriage and no need to go beyond 60 for the most part. I've driven a few. I did a review of one a few years ago on the channel that I had as a courtesy car for the day. Now at that time I did say if it was my money, nah, not for me. And at points I do stand by that, but I'd also had to drive it down the dual carriageway and I didn't like how shortly geared it was. The newer models might have had that gearing solution solved, but it's never going to be as good as the turbocharged ones. I appreciate turbocharged model, the booster jet model, might have had to have been canned because of emissions, which sucks if that was the case, but rules are rules. There's unit when it's not fantastic. It's a lot of extra weight for not a lot of extra power. In that super mini market, it's primarily dominated by the Ford Fiesta and the Vauxhall Corsa. I've never driven a Corsa. I've sat in one though because Sarah said she would like one after she passed her test, and it's the buttons and things inside it feel okay. Not fantastic, but okay. The seat felt a bit spongy. If I was driving to Newcastle in it, I would absolutely not want to. My preference would be a Ford Fiesta because they've got that gem of the EcoBoost engine, even with the hybrid. But obviously the Fiesta doesn't exist anymore. Probably come back some bastardised SUV shortly. It was always a solid choice. Skoda Fabia was always a good choice. Some of the smaller Kias, like Picanto was always a good choice. Citroen C1 was an okay choice to a point, as in it was cheap. Hopefully not cheap as in it's cheap and chatty, just cheap as in it was a cheaper alternative. A Clio as well. So personally, as Velocity Kinetics, the Velocity Kinetics choice would be, for general all-rounder, would be a Renault Clio. For just short blasts down the dual carriageway and then for mostly town driving or country driving, it would be a Swift if we're going brand new. If we were going to go used, it's hard to argue with a Fiesta. Very hard to argue with one of those, especially if it's a good model like a Vignale, so we can't argue with all the kit it comes with, although when they were new, I think my dad spent 25, 26 grand on one. Still think that was a dumb move. You don't pay 25 grand on a Fiesta. The dark horse for me, which again would be a Suzuki Bias, but the caveat with this one, it feels like I'm caveating everything. Caveat with this one is you're buying something quite a bit older and not on sale anymore. So your servicing costs are going to probably start going up, and the car may not be, if you're on a tight budget, it may not be viable for a long period of time. I would go Suzuki Baleno. And I've done the reviews on that. You can go watch back to back. You can watch my couple of reviews or read the review I did about the Baleno, or comparing the two Balenos I had and saying how they were so different. But Baleno would be the dark horse if you don't mind how old you're buying, because it was bigger, seats down, bigger inside than the Fiesta at the time. Granted, it probably will have lost out to the newer shape Fiesta and the final shape Fiesta. But at the time it was bigger internally, seats down, seats up, it wasn't too far behind. Miles per gallon, yeah, I appreciate it didn't get as many as the equivalent Fiesta. But depending on at what point of offer you bought the Baleno at the time, you could have paid as little as 10 grand for a car that that had a reversing camera, had air conditioning. It came with a sat-nav in SZT form, and that was a standard sat-nav. SZ5 had radar-guided cruise control on it. Some of them are incredibly well kitted. The boots, I can speak from experience that you can drive from where we are in Bury St Edmunds up to Gosforth in Newcastle, and it's doable. It's not too uncomfortable. Would it be nicer if it had some lumbar? Yes, the Fiesta does have the lumbar. Use choice, no age restriction. Baleno, use choice, trying to keep it fairly new. Fiesta. I should also state, before I go on to the next category, that I'm not considering price. It's just what money I would, if I had the money or the finance capability or the right size personal loan, it's what I would choose to go by. No budget set. So next category, family hatchback. This used to be a massive sector of the market before SUVs took over. What a waste of a vehicle they are most of the time. Don't get me wrong, I understand some people need people with disabilities, for example, or injuries if they're not permanently disabled, shall we say, if it's just a short-term thing but no clear end date, shall we say. I appreciate that might actually be the actual definition, but I know what I mean in my head. But the family hatchback, you've got classic Ford Focus, which always has been a good choice. The Peugeot 308 hatch and 208 as well, very good choices these days. That said, Peugeot have fluctuated up and down, in my opinion, over the years. Because I was speaking to my dad yesterday, and he was saying, "Well, with your height now, new grade, Chris, and new money, what would you actually go out and buy if you had to go buy a car?" And I mentioned the Peugeot that I quite like. It's like, I stayed clear of Peugeot for years because of you. I'm like, yes, because at the time Peugeot were the byword in unreliability, as well, and Citroën. They were, if they were broken down at the side of the road, oh, you're off, boy. The boy, he's off. But if they were broken down, but something was broken down by the side of the road, it was inevitably one of those three, or a Nissan Duke, or Kumquat. I know it's I just can't stop calling it a Kumquat. The Renault Megane has always also been a fairly good choice. A bit more engaging to drive, but you do run the risk of being on the receiving end of Renault reliability as the car gets older. Vauxhall Astra was always been another solid choice. Volvo V40 entered the scene a few years ago. Granted, it's gone now, but the V40 was a good choice. You've got your Mercedes A-Class, your Audi A3, Volkswagen Golf, Alfa Giulietta way back when. Don't think it's on sale anymore, but that's been and gone. Apologies, you might hear some ringing of a bell. George is shaking his head. He's just don't know where he's going. He's off to do whatever makes the most sense to him. The Alfa Romeo have been in on it. You've got, I think I've mentioned it already, the Golf, always a good choice. Skoda Scala, Honda Civic, Hyundai i30 was a good undercover choice. Kia Rio, Kia Ceed was always, again, good undercover choices. Mazda 3, the hatchback was a very, I've actually grown quite like them, because when I keep seeing them come up, I'm like, ooh, how much would one of those be for when Sarah passes a test, or if I have the money to replace the Swace? You've not got a short list of choices. It all depends on what your budget is to work with, though. If you're trying to stay on, well, actually, it's no point saying you're trying to stay on a budget these days, because of how much everything's gone up. The Velocity Kinetics choice, a bit me would say Skoda Scala. It was a Scala that made me decide I had to change the Baleno, because it was so much more comfortable than the Suzuki I had. It was very big boot, lots of gear on it for the price they were offering. Even the dealer I went to was offering to put the reversing camera on for £600, which was a generous offer. So it might be worth, if you find one that's used or extend that hasn't got a reversing camera on, Skoda can put it on for you. I've always had a soft spot for the Honda Civic, especially in recent years. I can't say why. I'm not sure why I like the Civic, as in some. And I don't mean it as in, why do you? It doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. I think I've just liked the slightly different approach Honda have taken. Different design, being a bit bigger all round. I heard one of their, I think they called it a Power Boost engine, which is their 3-cylinder turbo. Heard one fire up on the forecourt where my Suzuki dealer is. And it sounded angry. It was one of those things, like, if it sounded angry like that, that would have actually been quite interesting to hear at speed and being driven kind of angrily. But Honda, the old shape Honda Civic, would have been quite a good choice. I know some people say the new shape is still a hatchback, but I'm classing that as a saloon because of the way it shapes. I know some people say, well, actually, Skoda Octavia classes as a hatchback. I'm just going off what you would consider. If someone said hatchback, most people would know what you're talking about. Bit me would be tempted with the Mercedes A-Class, not going to lie, not until I nearly ran into the back of one after they pulled a dangerous stunt on the M25. I see a lot of them around. They're apparently built very well. Audi A3, I blow hot and cold on Audis. The only Audi I kind of really like is an A4. Not really fond of the rest of the range. Golf, it's a very, very solid choice. But I'm going to go completely off book with this one, as in sort of that's a weird choice. If I, like, again, this is all my own opinion, and if I had the money to go and go buy something. So if I had the money to go and buy something, Skoda Scala, Mazda 3. They would be my two choices brand new. I just think the Mazda 3, that it's just a cool shape. The ones I've seen, it's different. I mean, the Ford Focus is not a bad car. Far from it. Far from it. That would be probably one of my top used choices. The Focus is a super solid car, drives fantastically, brilliant engine range, and whilst the people say Ford stands for fixed or repaired daily, you know you're going to get the bits for them. You know you could easily get another one if something happened to the one you've got that made it no longer viable. But the Mazda has a different, I don't know if this is because I've got more of a love for Japanese cars these days than most things European, but it's just a different shape and things. And the Skoda Scala, it's a nice discreet hatchback that's very comfortable and very big inside. So it's so big inside that almost, if you're going to go buy an Octavia, apologies, frame rate might be starting to drop now. If you were to go buy an Octavia, when you open up the boot of the Scala, you seriously sit there thinking, do I actually need the extra boot space of an Octavia saloon? Used choices, Ford Focus, right at the top there. Vauxhall Astra, yeah, you probably could get a very good deal on them, especially depending on which dealer you're going to. Golf, again, you could probably find good deals, and they're all about. We'll come back up, George. No? Yes, looks like. Come on. We'll get there eventually. Golfs are always a good choice, fairly reliable, but again, with some of the as some German cars get older, they just start to become very, very expensive to run and maintain. And that'd be the same with Mercedes, same with BMW 1 Series. Even I've completely forgot about the 1 Series. There comes a point where you can't just get them done down at your local 10 bob garage. They then start, if you want to keep them in their tip-top shape, they then got to start going to specialists or back to the dealer, and then that hurts your pocket. But my dark horse for a used one, again we're going Japanese with it, would be the Subaru Impreza. That was a hatchback. I nearly bought one multiple times. I just never had the money to be able to do it. As in, I was about to pull the trigger, and then something would come up that meant couldn't do it. They're very big inside, very comfortable, a lot of equipment for their price point. Yes, their fall down point is the Boxer engine, because they are more thirsty than their inline counterparts, and from what I gather, sometimes there's revving a car for fun, and there's revving it because it just won't go. And some of the reviews I read at the time, the Subaru fell more into you've got to rag it because it needs to be ragged, not because it wants to be. But then you've got the all-wheel drive of a Subaru, which, especially with some of the recent, let's be honest, freak weather we've had, you probably would benefit with some all-wheel drive, especially in the winter, or with all the rain. So depending on how old you go, they'll even have a low-range gearbox in them, because the very first one I nearly bought did have a low-range gearbox in it too. Wasn't the big Rally Boy version. It was, again, it's just a solid, different choice. And yeah, I don't see a reason why you would ever go wrong with one. Right, so you might notice there's now a bit more light, and the flashing light's disappeared. George has disappeared off somewhere. It might still come for a crash landing, but I've been able to get up and at least put a light on. So, next up, small saloon. So, what do you mean by small saloons? Surely a saloon is a saloon. Yeah. You've got small saloons like there's the Mercedes A-Class saloon, the BMW 2 Series saloon. But then we're also meaning things like BMW 3 Series, Audi A4, Mercedes C-Class. If it was still on sale in the UK, Volvo S60, Skoda Octavia. We're basically talking, if a range has got multiple saloons, it's the smallest of what they offer, if that makes sense. One manufacturer that's immediately come to mind, Alfa Romeo with the Giulia. The Giulia would fall into this category because it's more often not compared with the 3 Series than it is the 5 Series. So as I'm talking, if I think of something else that another manufacturer, it will be whatever it's most commonly related to or compared to. So the good standard choices, like say your BMW 3 Series, you got your classic German trio, your 3 Series, your C-Class or your A4. If it was still on the market, you'd then have your Jetta in there or your Passat. But I think a Passat is a state only. If Toyota still did the Corolla as a saloon, you'd have your Toyota in there. If Vauxhall still did the Insignia or a Vectra, that would be in there. When you start thinking about it, actually, there's fewer and fewer and fewer manufacturers offering the saloons. Jaguar XE would fall into this category as well. Now, I've seen around Bury St Edmunds a Fiat Tipo saloon, and I have no idea whether that was a one-off, whether that's something you can actually get. So unfortunately for Fiat, I can't include you within this section of the video because I have no idea where you would fall. Are you done making jingle bell noises, George? You've got, this would even be where, if they still existed, Saab 9-3 would fall into this category. But if I was to go buy a saloon on the smaller side, my immediate thought would go to BMW for the 3 Series. I would actually really like to go Mondeo with it, but I don't think the Mondi doesn't exist anymore. Gone. Boom. But this is where the A4 has started creeping into my thoughts a bit more, because I saw a deal. I was just browsing my Facebook, and Audi came up on my adverts. Audi used cars. I thought the link. I thought, actually, I've never thought about an Audi. How much would an A4 be? And it was either Kings Lynn or Bury St Edmunds Audi. Was it red or was it orange? I can't remember. To my eye, the colour looked red, but I'm sure the colour description was something orange. It was an XDM, 5,000 miles, 73 plate. It had all the same, more or less all the same gear I've got on the Swace. The only real thing I would have gained was Quattro, because it came with a Quattro, and it came with electronic tailgate for the main headline extras over the Swace. And it was for 30,000. And it was suddenly a case of that. It's still, I mean, compared to what they were, it's still too much for one of those. Still far too much. But it was more attainable than it could have been. And the Honda Civic now falls within the small saloon category because of its shape. And the last generation that had that was the big hatchback, for a brief time you could get a Civic saloon, and I really liked it, and I was fine in the position to be able to go buy one. It'd gone off sale earlier, and there was no XDEMs that I could have bought instead, which was a pain, at least for me. My immediate thought would be BMW, because I wouldn't mind trying one. Mercedes, not really for me. The Audi, like I said, knowing what the deal was, to be honest, if they were still sold in the UK, brand new, my first choice would be a Volvo S60. I love them. I've always loved them, particularly the S, and even when it was even smaller saloon that they used to, the S40. Really loved those. The Alfa Romeo, I also really like the look of it. It's just a good looking car, even in its standard trim. Yes, the standard alloys do kind of let the lines down a little bit, but it does appear a very lovely car, and it's an Alfa Romeo, so we'll go kubang the day the warranty expires. So there's a lot of choice, and there's not a lot of choice. But I think, pulling a dark horse, if I had to, ignoring who I would like to go try, etc., who has drawn me the most, whilst I probably start walking towards the BMW and the Audi dealership, I'd probably veer for the last second and go for a Jaguar XE. The XE, someone today when I was in Stowmarket, they've got one in the dark green, sort of the one you associate with a Jaguar. It just looked lovely. For me, it's an underrated saloon. Not many people seem to rave about it. It's always BMW this, Audi that. I would also probably consider the Honda. within there as well. Just because you've got, on the one hand you'd be like, why are you saying Jag and then Jag and Honda in the same thing? The thing with the Jag, as it gets older, there are Jaguar problems, expenses, things breaking, there needing to be more specialised repairs. Honda, a bit easier to repair, a bit cheaper to run, and in 15 years' time, the Honda will more likely, ignoring other people crashing into it and it being written off, the Honda is more likely to still be running in 15 years' time than the Jag at 15,000 miles a year. New choice, Jaguar XE or the Honda Civic. Used, Volvo S60. No second thought. Volvo S60 would be my choice. If the S40 was a bit newer, as in if it had only gone out of production a year or two ago, not 5 plus, S40 would be within that category too. Dark horse as well, if you could find a used one. Hyundai i40, they look very nice cars, and I gather they also drive quite nicely. So new, Jaguar, Honda; used, Volvo, Hyundai. So on to small estate now. For the most part, it's the same models, same cars. There's the estate version of what's on offer. However, the Jag doesn't have an estate, nor does the Honda yet. Honda did do an estate Civic years ago, so it doesn't mean that they won't decide to bring one out. But then this brings other models like the Toyota Corolla into play. Suzuki Sways comes into play within this estate marketplace. And again, unfortunately, we've lost the Volvos from it. But again, Volvo V60 would be, I would, if I could afford one, I would have one. So just to be a little bit backwards, the used choice, Volvo V60. Done. Just done. For the new choice, I mean, the A4 I saw was quite. There was also an estate. There was an Avant, is how we call it. There was an Avant that was a good choice. Subaru Levorg back in the day looked quite good, and it was a bit interesting, but they don't make the Levorg anymore. Levorg was always a choice. I did nearly buy one, but I just, because I would have had to go to Stowmarket, and from where I lived that was 20 miles one way, I'd potentially to go look at one and then pick it up. I'd have put 80 miles on my Baleno regardless of what they would have valued it at, and then they could have potentially, not without reason, they could have taken money off any trade-in. Plus the Levorgs were going like hotcakes at the time, as in the used ones, because they took money off and so on. So that doesn't, I wouldn't add the Levorg into my used choice. It's still Volvo hands down, but new, it would have been a very, very good choice, and I would have really bought one. I'm biased towards Sway / Corolla because technically I own both because they're very similar, but I haven't driven the new, more powerful Sways, but in its 108 horsepower form, it's a very good choice. I think for me, if I was going to buy something within that, and then actually within this, the Passat now comes into play with it being an estate as well. It's a lovely looking car, and I probably wouldn't say no to having one when I saw one. New choice, I'm going to have to I'm lumping the Toyota and Suzuki together as one car because it is the same platform, just different badges. But the Suzuki Sways / Toyota Corolla, my bias would be more towards the Suzuki. I've always had good experience with well, mind you, my car, that one's become a bit of a shit magnet recently, but that's another video. My bias would be towards the Suzuki, probably going to get the car faster than you would from a Toyota dealership, probably going to get more personalised experience from it. Actually, Peugeot 308's in there too as well, in this category as well, the 308. Oh, I keep thinking of more that should be in this category. If I keep thinking of more, then the video will just be 20 minutes of just the estate section on its own. The problem is, because again, back on an SUV rant, the problem is SUVs are taking over that section of the market. They just are. If we can eventually start coming back the other way, I gathered from something I was reading the other day that actually saloons and estates might start making a comeback because SUVs are so high, they're not as MPG efficient as they could be compared to their low-down counterparts. Mazda 6 would have been in here too, but it's and the saloon as well, but they've stopped making them, at least for the time being. So for new, Swace / Corolla, leaning towards Swace, and probably the 3 Series, BMW 3 Series estate, because out of all the other ones, I like the Peugeot 308 estate. I did like the look of the Audi A4 Avant I saw, but the 3 Series estate is the one I've toyed with more often out of all of them. It's the one I've toyed with more often, not how could I afford one, should I go look at one. And also, I know they're really capable cars, because when I used to be in the police years ago, I was in the front seat of one of the traffic squad ones with Cleveland Durham RPU. Beautiful car, well driven by especially by that officer. She was amazing. But 3 Series / Toyota Corolla / Suzuki Swace would be my choice for a new small estate. Now on to the larger saloons. So now we're talking your Mercedes E-Class, we're talking Volkswagen Arteon, we're talking Audi A6, if I didn't say it already, BMW 5 Series. If they were still on sale, you'd be talking Volvo S90. Whilst someone might argue something like the Subaru Legacy Outback, I'm classing that in the 4x4 category. It's an estate design, but 4x4 category, just to keep it quite clear cut. Unfortunately, the Alfa Romeo doesn't do anything bigger. So if you want a bigger saloon, you're not bigger saloon. You're not in a very good place. Jaguar XF into there as well. The last I saw it was an estate, but if the XF is still in the saloon form, we'll include it here. I'm doing all this off the top of my head, just using my memory banks. This Kia Stinger is gone. Yeah, you're pretty much down to the Germans, because you can't, off the top of my head, the Japanese models, there aren't any. American models, they would fall into the other category, which, in fact, they weren't even mentioned, would show you what I think of them. So you're pretty much down to those as your big estates, big saloons. And I would have to say, I know I'm giving it to a BMW again, but it would probably be a 5 Series BMW, because I did say to Sarah, if I go up a grade at work, and I've gone up a grade, and unfortunately the cars have gone up 2 grades, I can't actually afford to get what I wanted to do. But I did say, if I could afford to, I'd like to get a 5 Series saloon or estate, but I'd be happy with a saloon. I just like a big saloon. There's not a lot to say about it. The 5 Series saloons, at least the ones I've seen around, and I appreciate this comment will mainly fall on how I've seen them driven, but the 5 Series saloons seem to be a bit quieter about how they go about their business, as in a little more understated, don't draw very much attention. Volkswagen Arteon does look very nice, and yeah, it's a very, very pretty car, but I suppose after my experience years ago at Volkswagen, I'm finding it hard to give Volkswagen a fair shot in any of my looking around for cars, but 5 Series saloon is what I would choose. In the used market, bearing in mind, as I said, Volvo S60 and V60 for the smaller ones, people would be going, oh, we'll go S90. No, I don't really like the look of the S90s. They look a bit ungainly, especially in the saloon form. I suppose if you can afford to buy an S90 but can only afford the flat colour and the standard trim, they don't look very nice. When you can afford to do the R-Design trim, or when it was available, should I say, when it was available, if you could afford to do that, the R-Design trim or the SE and things like that, that is when the S90 started to look better. But I can't bring myself to say S90, but I will say Volvo S80. We're going a few years ago now with it, but the S80 was on the V70 platform, was a little bit longer than the V70 back in the day. Same series of engines, same interiors. It did come with a V8, so you could have had an all-wheel drive V8 Volvo. But S80 would be a good choice in my opinion. But again, because we're starting to get on in age now with them, shit, there's a manufacturer I completely forgot. Peugeot within this. Peugeot 508. Peugeot 508 would be also on my saloon list. So BMW 5 Series or Peugeot 508. I know people might go, why 508 is more comparable to a 3 Series? Perhaps, but Peugeot already do a smaller estate which is more comparable in terms of size to a 3 Series. So that's what we're doing. So 508 would be my choice in this category, and 5 Series saloon for new. In the used, probably would pull the trigger on find a decent 508 Peugeot. E-Class, you're starting to walk into problems with the Mercedes. I would I did want to say Jaguar XF in this category, but you'd want, if I was doing that, I'd want an XFR, and that's just not doable. But for me, George, you're showing the world your tush. Yeah, I know. But I'd probably find a good used Jaguar XF as well. So used Peugeot 508, Jaguar XF, new Peugeot 508, BMW 5 Series. Onto the big estate. So effectively you've got the same cars in estate form. And this one is a no-brainer for me, Peugeot 508. I sat in one, it was really comfortable. Haven't driven it, so it might not be a very nice driver, or at least not drive the way I would like to. Off now you've won this, but 508 is where I would go. Brand new. I mean, 5 Series as well, so it's pretty much the same as the saloon, really. You can't, in my opinion, you can't look at the saloon without liking the estate, or you can't like the saloon without liking the estate. That's just my opinion, which I'm allowed to have. I know this is the internet, but it's my opinion. So 5 Series and 508 again. In the used, XF, but this time I'd add the V90. The S90 has weird proportions in the saloon. The V90 looks a lot better than the S90. So I'm not quite ready to stand from the rooftops and just go bother, and that's it. Because, well, it's not quite got the right shape. But the V60's just got something just so right about the V60. But V90, solid choice. XF would be my next choice. But thinking of the electric versions that are available, we'll shout out some EV power here. Oh, got another cat turning up in here now. Shouting out some EV power here. Polestar would be my choice. Not Tesla. Polestar would be my choice in the saloon side of things. That's where you're talking big saloon, small saloon. I know the Tesla does them. Is it the Model 3 and the Model Y or something like that, or Model S? I can't remember what their models are off the top of my head. I know they do a smaller saloon and a bigger saloon, but I would go Polestar for both. You get the same sort of Volvo engineering. You've got, I think Polestar have got their shit sorted on it. Basically, they just seem to land right, even with the Polestar 1 and Polestar 2. The older of the models now, they just seem to have got it right. So on the electric front, Polestar, granted though you need incredibly deep pockets. So why I'm a little reserved to say anything electric, because if you're going to say, well, why not electric hatchbacks and all this, like, can you honestly sit there and tell me that you would rather spend £40,000 on an electric Vauxhall Corsa when for £40,000 you could have a Peugeot 508 estate? To me, the math ain't mathing. It's that'd be a pug for me in that situation, no matter how clean and efficient the Corsa may be. Heading into the last portion of this video, which is the SUV or before sort of side of things. So this is a tough one really, because bit of me wants to categorize SUVs all together, because the problem is with the SUV market, you've got things like you've got reasonably priced and very good cars like the Suzuki S-Cross and the Vitara, Honda CR-V and the ZR-V that's coming out, and the HR-V, Range Rover Evoque, Land Rover Discovery Sport. You've got the Volvos in there, so the XC60, XC90. You've got Subaru Outback and what's the other one that's even bigger? Is it the Legacy? You've got a couple of big Subarus within there. There was the Mitsubishi Outlander. I don't know if that's still in production, but you did have that for a time. You've got Alfa Romeo in on the deal now. You've got what the Americans offer. Got all the big Mercedes like your M-Class, your ML Class. R-Class went in production a long time ago. Audi, you've got their Q Series 3, 5, 7. You've got BMW X1 to what have you. So it's a really tough one to nail down. And you've even got like Volvo introducing the EX30 and the C40 into this. And a lot of cars that are electric that have just gotten the SUV shaped because it's easier for them to go. Then you've got things like your Kia Sorento, Hyundai are in that market too. There's a lot of cars in there, but some of them are just not. They're not up to snuff, in my opinion. Some of them are just there because they're there. Some people have just made them because they just thought it's a slot in the marketplace to fill. Can you honestly tell me that Mercedes were struggling to sell SUVs before they introduced something smaller than the M-Class? You tell me that they're struggling with that, and then adding the GLA and the GLB and the GL whatever, and then the G-Wagon and things. Can you honestly tell me that they weren't struggling? They were struggling to shift those. Did they need any more? Even Porsche getting in on the act with the Macan and the Cayenne. And then, like I said, Jag getting on it too. You know, it's just mostly rebadged Land Rovers. Or at least that's my impression. It's just a rebadged Land Rover. But Ford with the Kuga, the Puma, and the EcoBoost. And then they had the Edge, as in the model called the Edge. Not, they don't have the edges in. You're talking, they're doing something better. But they had the Edge years ago as well. And then I believe you can import things like the Explorer and the Expedition and things like that. There's a lot of different things you can do. Oh, you're off again, George. All right. You see my struggles with this. I suppose I'm going to try and do it by size if I can. So small SUV, medium and large SUV. So small SUV would be things like your S-Cross, your Vitara, things of that sort of shape, Ford Puma, smaller Hondas, Hyundai Tucson, and I can't remember the model now, Kia Niro within all this. I have to say, I'm not necessarily nailing my colours to Suzuki Mast again, but the S-Cross does have to have a special mention because I did nearly buy one. When I got my first Baleno, I nearly bought an S-Cross instead. It was just 30 quid more a month that I don't think I could properly have afforded. Oh, hello, Izzy. But I have to say the S-Cross there, but the funny thing is I've never really been that bothered about the current shape Vitaras. I do like the older, chunkier Vitara model. The Puma I don't like. I sat in one, it was horrible. I talked about it in the Unusual Surprise. Peugeot have got quite a few ones in there, like the 3008. Probably might go 3008 when Sarah passes the test. Skoda Kamiq is in there, but you're looking at least when I spoke to them, you're looking at a year lead-in time. And then you've got things like the Tiguan, the T-Cross, is it? What's called T-Cross? Tiago from Volkswagen. So you've got a lot of choices in that area of the market. So that one will ultimately boil down to your budget. The X1 as well doesn't look too bad, as does the X2. The X2 is probably the BMW I would have if I had to buy something within the SUV market that can't do any off-roading. Because it's a much more handsome form factor than a lot of its rivals. The Q2 looks a bit bolder. Q3 and Q5 and Q7, Q8, just all of them have been put through the photocopier at different sizes, in my opinion. So going new, I think if I was going to go buy something, I would probably, go Suzuki S-Cross or BMW X2. Going on to the sort of a medium-sized SUV, so medium-sized, I'm talking up to the size of Ford Kuga. Now, some people might say, well, what? That's very big. But the fact that there's even bigger, like your Range Rover and things, this is you see my difficulty with what I'm lining up. Medium-sized SUV / 4x4s. Again, you got things like your Volvo XC90 that will fall within that, the Ford Kuga itself, the Honda CR-V, various Lexus models, Mercedes is in there too. I just realised for the last one I didn't say what I would buy used. Used, probably the X2. But anyway, back on this one. So back to this one, Land Rover Discovery Sport would be my choice. Because when I sat in one, I've never ever sat in a car and felt so instantaneously comfortable. My dad's had some fantastic Volvos over the years that were very comfortable. Particularly he had a 54 plate bottle green Volvo V70 with a cream interior, and that was an insanely comfortable car. That was unfortunately picked by the Land Rover. And an asterisk here that Sarah would like us to have a 7-seat car, if money goes our way to be able to afford one, more because a lot of people in her family don't drive, so it's just to take as fewer vehicles as is possible and gives other drivers a bit of a break. So if we're going to have to add an asterisk in of something 7-seat, then something 7-seat, probably Skoda Kodiaq or Peugeot 5008 would have to be honest shout-outs without breaking the bank. Now, if I needed something in the used capacity within that, if I had to get something used with the 7-seat, then Land Rover Discovery, the big one, the full fat Discovery, that'd have to be a pre-reg job though. That's starting to get into the very big SUV territory. The Jags would be quite interesting, but I would probably go Land Rover on both. Go Land Rover Discovery Sport. Let's get an older one, because I know someone once said to me when I was talking about the Land Rover, so what about the Range Rover Evoque? And I was like, I didn't like it very much. For me, knowing that I preferred the Discovery, it would just feel like an enormous compromise from day one. So Disco Sport for new and for used. Finally, within the SUV category, we're talking the big ones. So we're talking the X7, X8, Q8, Q7s, Range Rovers, you name it. And that's a tough one because I'm not very fond of any of them. I'd rather spend all that money on a saloon estate. I'd rather have... I don't... If I'm having to buy something that big, I've got a lot of questions as to what's happened in my life to be able to afford that, and why I feel the need for one of those. I know some would say, looking at the big saloon, big estate, well, you said a 5 Series, you don't need one of those. And suppose people could also say, you drive a Suzuki Swiss, but you've got no children, why do you need something that big? I suppose, but I didn't want to buy an SUV. If I had to, it would depend on what I needed it for. So if I'm just if Sarah became the worst soccer mum on the planet, then probably end up with a Range Rover, to be honest, because big luxury SUVs, even though Range Rover don't always have the greatest reputation for reliability, Range Rover have been doing it for years. They've got the formula down. There's a reason why you see so many of them. I got overtaken on the way up to Newcastle by an X7 and then by a Q8. Those things are next level in size. There's no need for them. They just look intimidating and bullying, and I cannot fucking stand them. I just don't, I didn't get them. Can't understand it, like. I don't know why they exist. Range Rover had that corner of the market cornered. It's something that they've done very well in for years. So if I had to do something, it would be Range Rover. If I needed something for off-roading purposes within that very big, it would be a Defender. And the same in the used, it would be Land Rover. They've done it the longest. They've done it, I'd say they've done it the best. And again, I know the reliability is not necessarily the greatest in their track record, but they've been doing this a lot longer than most, especially with if you need something to properly go off-road, Defender. That is the only word that should ever leave your mouth. So finally, we're on to the final category, which is 7-seat cars. So I'm just looking at something, so something's crossed my mind to see if it's still on sale. I just want to check it out. But when I'm talking 7-seat, I'm going to have to reluctantly include some SUVs into this, because 7-seat cars, as you would think of them, don't really exist. So things like this is what I'm checking. I think the Vauxhall Zafira has gone off sale. Likewise, I think the Renault Scenic has gone off sale. I laugh, 28 grand for a Focus starting. Fucking hell. Wasn't that long ago they would have only been 17, 18 starting. Ah, the S-Max does still exist, as does the Galaxy. And then you're on to things like the Teneo Custom, which is basically a transit van that they've turned into basically a minibus. Hyundai do something as well. I think it's called the i800. That's a similar thing. 7-seat that I know of is like Peugeot 5008, the full-size Land Rover Discovery, Peugeot 5008. But if I was going to buy something new, I'm just going to check Renault, because they also had this on the market a while ago. So you've got from Renault, you've got the Traffic Passenger, which is basically a converted van into a bus. So I've just seen the Scenic's back, but that's... This is mad. That's terrible. The Scenic is a people carrier. It's not an SUV. Having seen what I think is available, for Galaxy, brand new. The Galaxy's been around for years. It is a fantastically comfortable car. The last time I sat in one, which that was a 68 plate one the last time I was in one, which was a taxi. So, and the taxi itself was about a year or two old, so it would have had a hell of a lot of use, and it was still very comfortable. It's a very big car, so if you've got 7 seats, that'll be fantastic. I'd follow that up with possibly Skoda Kodiaq, but you're looking at a year build time for one of those. Used, depending on how old you're going, a Vauxhall Zafira was always a very good choice when it came to people carriers for years. A Vauxhall Zafira was almost the byword in it. It was Galaxy versus Zafira, and the Renault Scenic within there too. So I suppose if I had to go used, depending on how old we're talking, probably a Zafira or a Scenic, but it depends on how old those ones are that are available. If I can get something a bit newer, Galaxy again. Anyway, that concludes today's Velocity Kinetics video. Looking at what I would buy. Now, as I will re-stress again, it's what I would choose to buy if I had the money. It's not, this is better, this is better. It's completely my own opinion. And as you've seen, most of my opinions have not been in favour of the German cars, as in not many have been chosen. Quite a lot of Japanese cars have been chosen, and surprisingly a couple more French than I thought would have been, and not very many Swedish. But there we are. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Apologies about any audio issues. I'm having to do this quite a long way. Hope you enjoyed seeing the cats again. If that's all you're here for, then fine. Donate to the PayPal page so I can buy them some more food. The GoFundMe for the NC500. I've run into some issues trying to do that. When I was trying to cost it up, the numbers for myself were varying so much that it was just, I need to sit and rethink. I shouldn't be doing it at a time when I'm really busy. and that's what happened. I was trying to do it when I was too busy and just couldn't get it right. So that is coming. I've got some plans for 2024 videos, but I am not 100% sure on what I'll be doing. But anyway, I'm recording this just before Christmas. I think I said the last video was probably the last one for the year, and it might well have been. But if I get this out before Christmas, have a good Christmas, have a good New Year, drive safe. If you're going to have a drink, just don't drive. Flat out. Just flat no. We'll see you in 2024, and if it is 2024, Happy New Year. And we'll see you next time.